with jury nullification and social justice, and you can get into long debates about that. And that's not really where we want to have our focus. But please know that how this is used within the judicial system has been amazing for countries that have embraced it, and we are moving forward with, again, not saying that there's not a consequence for behavior, but that we've got to work through it if we're going to make a change forward. So dealing with that it really started to bubble up, knowing that what we were doing in our justice systems is not working, and how do we find a parallel additional avenue. Family group conferencing. How many have heard of family group conferencing? Okay. This is an amazing tool that is used with the belief system that we all already know our own best solutions. And really with family group conferencing, it's getting those within the family system and extended family system into a space. This is the challenge. What are our strengths? What's our end goal? And how can we use what's already within this room to move this forward if you just had a little bit of help facilitating access to different systems and having some oversight and accountability in the process. So family group conferencing is a wonderful way of, and you can use this model within a classroom to be dealing with challenges or even positive things, but it's reaching into ourselves with the philosophy, I already have my own best solution, I just may need a safe space and an accountable space to be able to work it out. Terry O'Connell, if you take the journey deeper into restorative practices, you're going to hear his name over and over again. He's kind of our modern day Superman. He was an Australian police officer who used restorative practices to really radically turn around a community. And he's dynamic and very, very persuasive as to why this works and how this works. So if you ever get a chance to go to a conference and take a workshop with him, he's amazing. And then some of the other, Mark Thorsburn is our more academic kind of pillars over there, and I have some of her work over on the table. The IIRP in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania grew out as an alternative ed high school that continues, the Bosemont Academy. And they started out with the tough love philosophy of the 70s, and when restorative practices started to kind of bubble up in those different places of the map, they reined it all in and said, we've got to find a way of creating this practice and making it explicit and usable for everybody. So this is where the Institute's work has come from, is this alternative ed high school system that is now in Bucks County. Can somebody read this for me? Volunteer?
Restorative practices in justice echoes ancient and indigenous practices employed in cultures all over the world, from Native American and First Nation Canadian to African, Asian, Celtic, Hebrew, Arab, and many others. Restorative practices equals proactive and builds relationships. Restorative practice equals reactive and repairs relationships.
Restorative justice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So if we can kind of hold these two concepts in our head, if we are implementing the umbrella philosophy 80% of the time and being proactive to build the relationship, when you have to do something reactive, and that should only be 20% of the time, if that, you're going to be much more effective. If all you're doing is working with your students in circles when you have a challenge, you're not building the relationships that are going to make them effective, and they're going to feel like that kind of relationship building only happens when it's punitive. It's as if a parent is only dealing with you when you've broken a glass or you've put a dent in the car. Spilled coffee. So restorative justice absolutely necessary to the practice, but again, you want to be more in the responsive versus the reactive. So if I could just get some popcorn. Amy, could you start, and then Steve?
It helps now then to step back and take the long view.
We can't do everything, and there's a sense of liberation in that.
We can do something, and we need to do that well.
We plant the seed that one day will grow. We may never see the end result.
We provide the yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities.
Anything strike anyone? I'll just ask 3 people if they want to share from this. Yes.
Number 2, I think as educators, we feel like we need to do everything. We need to change everyone. I think sometimes
important to know that we may never see the end result. We plant the seed, but something might not happen positively for a couple of years with that student.
That's so key, and I think, and I keep on sharing with our own staff, if you're expecting results even the first 3 times, that you're going to be so disappointed. This is really long haul stuff that you've got to have the faith that you may never see the result, but if you've planted that seed, it will take root and germinate at a certain point. Anything else? Yes.
The last one, I think, is just saying that we can be catalysts for change.
Yep, absolutely. That's within our scope of control, is to be that catalyst. We're actually not going to do this. But if you can just kind of scan this real quick, and maybe this is some food for thought for you guys later on. So how important is it that students and their parents understand where you are coming from and what are you all about? How important is that to you guys?
I think it's really important because otherwise they come to the relationship with you with their own preconceived ideas about what a teacher is, what your role is. And if you don't specifically and intentionally make it clear to them, they're going to treat you in a way that's consistent with how they feel.
Yeah. Anybody else? When we do orientations with new families, and out of 700 students, I did, I think, almost 300 new student orientations last year. That's the kind of turnstile that we're on. Number one, we start out the year that all of our families at a kickoff are exposed to these concepts. We share our question cards that we'll go over later. But at every new orientation, number one, I share with families, you are your student's first and best teacher. We will always honor that, and we ask that you honor that we're here to support your student's best education. And I hand them a copy of the question cards as well, and I'm like, this is what, hopefully you're not seeing a staff member or another student in somebody's face with the finger wagging at them. Hopefully you're seeing people process, but if you could also use these questions, these restorative questions at home, that would be a huge step in the right direction, and bringing them into the process and making them aware that we really do believe that they are the foundation of what we can do well, I think has made a great strides at McKinley K-8 in helping that community come together. Mindful that we're dealing with high transientness, and that message may be said tomorrow and they're gone in 2 weeks, but at least we're trying, and it's that this is what's within our circle of influence right now. So this is why I stress, if this is something that you guys choose to do, you really do need to dig deeper and take the time to do that, because that mutual vocabulary and that you really know why you're doing it is important for effectiveness. So please, if you do continue, it's really important that your framework is very concrete. So the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather to them or for them. And this can kind of sound like hippie kumbaya practice. And for some people, it's like, of course, that totally makes sense. We need to work together. But for other people, we do need to be explicit in saying that we believe through research that this is actually, this is the right way to go, that we've got to be working with people and not doing things to them or for them. And so to develop community and to manage conflict and tensions by repairing harm and restoring relationships. And we won't be able to get to that repairing harm and restoring relationships if we're not working with people. So this is Ted Wachtel, the founder of about a 12-minute video. Is it coming across? So this is going to give you just a complete overview. It's going to take you from informal to formal, and it's going to hit all of the highlights today.
See how good you are stalling.
So I mentioned briefly, that I had a poster up in the back of my classroom. I was very fortunate to work for 2 years at Crispus Attucks Youth Build. I was their character ed and community service learning development person. How many of you are familiar with Crispus Attucks Youth Build? Okay, almost every. It's basically an alternative at high school. It kind of provides a second, third, and sometimes fourth chances for students who really just have not been successful within the educational community. So my Tuffy Toughs, my gangbangers, we got the whole gamut there. And we were fortunate to be able to have a small pot of money to bring in the IIRP, and they did a training with the staff. And since I was already working on these character ed things, boy, this just fit in hand in glove with what we were doing. So the very next day after our 3-day training, I set up my classroom in a circle, and our students would be in academic class 1 week and on the work site the second week. So I had only been doing this for 6 weeks, and so 3 of those weeks the students had been on work site. And I had what I thought was the most amazing lesson to teach them, and we often used short video clips with the lesson, and they would always get irritated. Our students would get irritated because they couldn't watch the whole movie. That's why we had movie night. So, but I knew if we didn't start immediately, we were not going to get through this section, so they came into class, and instead of doing our normal welcome circle and check-in, I hit the lesson immediately, and this was my upper level academic group. They were horrendous.
I was trying to figure out what I could have plugged down there.
They were absolutely horrendous. They were not interactive with me. They were talking amongst themselves. We didn't get through it. They were totally annoyed because and I was like, what the heck just happened here? So the very next day we got in a circle, we processed. I asked them, how much time do you think staff members spend on lessons outside of class, and kind of walked them through, and I said, when a staff member spends, time putting together something for you and it doesn't go well, how do you think that makes us feel? And they were like, oh, people must be disappointed. And one student had a light bulb, and he said, oh, was that you yesterday, miss? And I said, oh yeah. I said, I was really disappointed. I thought this lesson was going to really speak to your hurts. We didn't get through it. And the other student raised a hand and said, but miss, you were so mad at us yesterday. I was like, no, totally wasn't. I was stoked for this lesson. I said I was frustrated at the end. I said, what cues did you get that I was mad at you yesterday? They said, well, you didn't do our opening circle. And I was like, whoa. I said, well, explain to me, what does that mean to you? And they said, this is the only time we get to share anything about ourselves. And we've never done that before. And we know that you're listening and the student next to me is listening. And that is so important to us. And I was like, I was completely blown away that within such a short period of time, that it had connected that deeply with these students, and they were able to articulate how much it meant to them. So,
Good.
Restorative practices are a way that people can have more voice and more choice in the things that matter to them in everyday life, in exchange for them taking greater responsibility. And the range of possibilities of informal and formal restorative practices, from one-to-one conversations or speaking in larger circles, allow people the chance to talk to each other in a real way, to say real things without it exploding, but rather staying within a framework that people are civil and can hash through things and agree to disagree or agree, but at the very least, they gain a shared understanding of each other and where each other's coming from.
Stephanie, when you mentioned about communication with your mom, I felt a sense of relief, but then also I can relate to that. And I felt a little angst or something in me, felt for you, felt compassion for you, because I can relate to that as well. So thank you for sharing that.
I felt sad and a little apprehensive when you talked about losing Dad.
Yeah.
As a parent, I lost my mom not too long ago, and it's a very hard thing to deal with, going on your day, knowing that they're not there when they're supposed to be there, because parents are always supposed to be there. And just want you to know how you feel inside.
Thank you for going through this with me. I wanted to talk about an incident that happened last week with the tobacco and you bringing it into the house. Can you take me through what happened?
I was going through my stuff because I'm moving, and in my car there was a bunch of my belongings, and I have an incense box that I used to hide my drugs and money and things that I wasn't supposed to have in this box, and I was going through it to see if I had anything in there, and I found a pack of cigarettes but nothing else. And I brought the pack of cigarettes because it was exciting for me to find them, especially because of where they were placed.
So what happened was you brought nicotine into the group home, a pack of cigarettes into the group home.
Mm-hmm.
Who has been affected by what you did, and in what way?
I have affected myself because I was worrying about how the situation was going to be handled and how I was going to be consequenced. Is that the word?
That's good.
Okay. And I was afraid that it was going to go back to my probation officer and I was going to get in a lot of trouble. And I've also hurt you, Miss Barb, because I made you worry about me and worry about how that situation was going to affect me and how it was going to affect the other girls in the house. And I also made you take time out of your day to help me process and deal with the situation. Mm-hmm. And I've also harmed my mom because I could have jeopardized my opportunity to go out and see her and have a pass with her. And I've also worried about her because I thought that maybe she would be getting in trouble for not allowing me to bring the cigarettes back, but knowing that I had the cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, Brie, can you tell me a little bit about what happened?
I get bullied almost on a daily basis because of my weight, and I say stuff about myself, which I think gives people the go-ahead to say stuff about me.
What do you think needs to happen to make things right?
I think I need to stop putting myself down and bring myself up, just let other people know that it's not okay to put me down. And I need to tell her when she says stuff that it's not funny anymore, and I don't think it's a joke, and I would like her to stop doing that because I don't do it, so she shouldn't do it either.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
How's your mother been affected?
Because my mother, she works 2 jobs and she don't have any time to come up there and check up on me during the mornings or during the afternoon. And it affecting my teacher because it'd be hard for them to teach and give directions.
So what do you think needs to happen to make things right?
I had to drink my behavior and start talking.
Thank you.
What are you doing to become successful in life? So what are you currently doing to become successful in life? She was the closest. She was very good. Pick a direction.
No, I'm going to school.
Oh, I'm decent. Thanks.
I'm going to school, getting my education.
Teaching you people.
Getting my education. Doing what I need to do to achieve my goals.
Get my education.
Trying to get a good education so I can get a good job.
Studying and focusing, being prepared.
Being important. Focusing on my work and learning. Staying focused on my education.
Going to after school programs and getting mentoring.
Staying focused and believing in myself. Stay positive.
Getting my grades up.
Studying what I don't know so I know it.
Motivating myself.
Staying focused and practice.
Studying the things I'm doing.
Working hard.
Set goals for myself.
Pay attention.
Focusing on school. Studying to myself and learning.
Okay.
This is an opportunity for all of you to be involved in repairing the harm that has been done. This conference will focus on an incident which happened Thursday, January 28, 1999, when John brought the brass knuckles with a blade onto the school bus.
And went to school. And then we got called down. I didn't think there was anything about it until someone brought up the brass knuckles, so I decided to confess instead of everyone else getting blamed for it. I just confessed.
What was your reaction at the time of the incident?
Well, first I was hurt for the simple fact that I thought I had a better relationship with all the kids on my bus.
My initial response is again, you should have never had the weapon. I'm concerned about the driver.
I don't consider it as, oops, I forgot it was in my pocket. Because again, there's no reason to be carrying a weapon. It's called a fighting knife. That's exactly how it's sold. That's the title of it. And that's exactly what people use it for. I don't want to sugarcoat this in any way. It's ugly. It's mean. And so I took the look of that knife, and I took my feelings of looking at that knife, and I put them right with you. Because I felt if you had the knife, then that's the kind of person you were intending to act, mean and ugly.
And I was just really disappointed when you brought this knife on. And like Tawn said, it's not a little knife. It is a large knife. I don't know if I really buy, John, that you forgot you had it in your pants. I had this knife in my hand, and it's a heavy knife, and you'd know if it was in your pocket on the bus. And I heard you say, that the other kids were telling you not to say anything. It's not on anybody else, it's on you. You made the decision not to say anything to Karen and to break that trust with Karen. Nobody else did. You did.
What are the main issues?
Well, first, safety of everyone concerned. Would he ever do this again? That I wouldn't know. I hope not. I have more faith in John than anything.
What has been the hardest thing for you?
I guess telling everybody about it. Where's John? People I work with were my friends, more or less. Asking, how's John doing now? Because I know he's going through the parole and everything. And I got to tell him that, well, now he's in detention. He's not even home.
I had a knife like that, right? But I got rid of it because I got into a lot of trouble with a knife, man. You don't need a knife like that.
What I have gotten from you is that you would like John to say why he did what he did and give it some thought and have an answer before he returns to school, if that's an option. I've also heard to utilize responsible adults and friends for guidance. for all weapons to be removed from your possession, turned over to your dad, and to be locked up. It was also asked that you do not engage in any use, trade, so on and so forth of weapons.
Here too. Yeah, that's
There you go.
Yeah. Was that helpful? I mean,
It's got
We don't have one that visits detention there. Why can't I understand? Why do you have to lie about everything? Anita, I mean, why does she?
So this took you very quickly through, as I said, from the informal to those brief conversations to a more very formal conference. When you're looking at time, and again, it's not formulated, but those quick conversations, less than 2 minutes. A responsive circle, 5 minutes in the morning. If you're doing something that's a little bit more reactive, let's say that there was harm that happened in the classroom, something that happened down on the playground or in the cafeteria, or just something in the classroom, those could typically take maybe 10-15 minutes if you're using the framework. Something like the more formal conference, anywhere from an hour if you have a lot of participants, and you would encourage even the person who's done the harm to have some supportive people there as well. That's part of it, is you want the people that are impacted within their lives, because typically people think when they've done harm that I'm the only one who's affected, and maybe the person I've harmed. And that's that whole demonstration piece, is you want them to appreciate they are part of the community. If it's something within the school system, again, you can kind of tailor that to be anywhere from a half hour to an hour. If it's something that's major, I've given you some resources. There was a bridge that was burnt down in Bucks County, and the whole community came together in a huge circle to deal with that. That was like a half-day conference. And another element I want to point out is with the more formal conferences, they'll always have a snack or a meal afterwards, because that breaking of bread and that interactive relationship afterwards is almost as important as what goes on within that conference, again, because you're building that sense of community. Any light bulb moments or just things that stood out to you watching this? Doable? Worthwhile? Okay. So I asked you earlier to think about what I call pound of flesh mentality. What do you think that the purpose is of when we're in that punitive, we know that we're moving away from zero tolerance, but what does that pound of flesh get us? Anybody? Try. Can you expound on that?
I guess just the feeling that you can make things right by punishing someone who's done something that has harmed you in some way.
Anybody else?
I think isolation, because I think that the person who is the perpetrator often feels very alone then and separated from the rest of the class. If everybody else is good and I'm not, or everybody else is following rules and I'm not, everybody else thinks they're doing it.
Anything else? Come on, moms and dads. Let's be honest.
I think whatever the community is, it gives them a visible.
Yeah.
Like they see that something happened to that person who did it, and that makes them feel better. There's that visible consequence.
I think we would like to believe that we're getting accountability out of it.
Is it working? I don't think you guys would be here today if you thought that it was working. But one of those awareness pieces that I want us to think about, I know you're working within your educational community, but I want to hold out some responsibility for that we operate in a larger community as well.
I think it's working in a sense of fear, and that's not the direction we should be going in. You know, like I might behave because I'm afraid, as opposed to behaving because I want to behave.
Absolutely. The other?
I think it works as a deterrent for most kids, for most people, you know, but for chronic kids or the kids who need the support the most, it doesn't work as a deterrent. I look back at an example I have is my son, when he was in kindergarten, he had to turn his card once, and when he got home, he melted. I wasn't there, my wife told me, but he just melted on the sidewalk, and never turned his card, you know, so it worked for him. That was, you know, but there were many kids in this, and I've seen many kids that turn their card. Yeah, that's not it's just part of the, it does not work for them.
Right, I would agree. And I think for a lot of students, and you know, and for adults, sometimes you are not going to out-tough some people, and just that active engagement may be the only relationship that they get. So that's what they're going to engage you in, is really, you know, try to go toe-to-toe, nose-to-nose with you. And it won't move anything, it really won't move anything forward. So it really, yes, there needs to be accountability. Absolutely, there needs to be structure. We all function better within structure. But is it punitive or is it restorative? So again, we start to ask these questions. What happened? Who's been harmed or affected? What needs to happen to repair that harm? And I want to pop this in here because it's not something that's always within the practice. We talk about it, but it's not on the cards. I use this when I see an 8th grader tying a kindergartner's shoe. I'll ask the questions. Hey, what happened? Oh, you know, little Jamil's shoe was untied. Hey, okay, so what were you thinking? Oh, I wanted to help them. I didn't want them to trip. Well, who's that impact when you do that? Well, obviously it impacts them. They're not going to skin their knee, but, and I'll say, well, who else might be impacted by the fact that you reached out in kindness? Oh, well, maybe their family, maybe the teacher, maybe another student. So getting students, getting ourselves to process, this is not just when something is harmed, but is to move forward positive behavior as well, and that's super important. So we'll touch on this real briefly and work through it. The basic premise is when we are working with people, we're all much happier. If you're a control freak like me, it's really hard. And I either, as a mom, I would go from the 2 to the 4 because I wanted it done my way or the highway. I was very rarely in the not. You know, my kids would wish that I would just turn my back oftentimes. And it's hard for me sometimes as a staff member and a community member because I know how I want things done. And of course, you know, when I do it, it's fantastic, right? So it's a release of control when we work within the with pain. And really what that looks like, though, is offering high control with high support. And having the faith that, again, it gets back to that baseline premise. We all have our own best solutions within us. And it's not my job to fix somebody. It's not my job to mold someone. And this may or may not be your paradigm. So I don't want to force it on you, but it comes from the premise, someone once shared, if you can view each individual as a map that already has their journey imprinted on them when they're born, it's not my job to mold that child or that staff member or a family member. It's my job to unfold and allow them to figure out how they're going to get from point A to point B. Do they want to take a side road? Do they want to take the highway? Do they want to go to the backside of the map? It's not my job to tell them. It's my job to be supportive and have structure and to identify what our norms are. And my norms might be different than yours, but we're going to work together to create what we can consider a collective norm to move forward. And that's where we're going to operate in that way. And so we will do just a quick, if maybe 3 people can group up. And can we talk about a time when someone in a position of authority treated you restoratively? So if I can get Steve and Amy and Kevin and you guys and